I just want the chance to fight.
You murdered them!
Shut up!
I deserve to know the truth.
We shall bring the colonies to the brink of destruction. Fire!
Turn Washington Spies.
I really enjoy the shows, guys. I'm really enjoying it. I want to talk about the concept for the series, how it began. So Craig and Barry, if you guys want to sound off on that, how it turned started.
Based on a book by Alexander Rose that he did amazing research for. We were very fortunate to be able to option it, and Craig came along and created the series based on that book.
Yeah. So where did you guys want to take, obviously the book is its own form. How do you guys want to turn it into a series? What was the concept behind that?
Well, it was all centered around the Culper Ring, which was this team of spies. They were all childhood friends who grew up, and so they're a team. They've got missions. They've got an enemy, and so these are things that we recognize, and we know how to TV that, But then it was just the exotic time period and all that stuff, and that's really what made it.
And what was great about the book is it was an unknown story, and I think that was one of Craig's original impetuses to want to do it, because nobody really knew what happened after Nathan Hale and how this Culper Ring formed. Ben Talmadge was a childhood friend, a Yale friend of Nathan Hale's, and so it sort of builds from there. And these were all truly, it started with a group of 4 friends.
I mean, we know a lot about that era, but we also don't. What did you guys do as far as research, and then how much did you want to dramatize it?
Well, Alex's book really was the Bible, and then everything dramatic was to take some of the tensions that were happening at the time and put them into some of the characters, like Abe, for example. Abe, in real life, got married after the war. And his father was a patriot. But for us to make his father, a loyalist and a Tory was a better metaphor for what was actually going on at the time. It was about a family getting torn apart, which is what the revolution really felt like, as opposed to, colonists pushing off oppressors who they didn't know. They all felt like they were Englishmen trying to define themselves as something else.
Yeah, and I want to talk to the actors. Obviously, this is a crucial point in our country. These are our founding fathers. It's not to be taken too lightly, So what kind of research did you do, and what did you think of the script? I'll start with Nick, and then we'll go to Ian, and then up to Heather.
Well, I read Alexander Rose's book, which is our Bible, and I'm lucky because my dad's a history teacher. So whenever I wanted to cheat, I would just call him on the phone.
Did he do your papers for you? Was he doing? Yeah.
He proofread all my papers. I actually joined the series a little late, so I had a lot of catch up to do with the rest of these amazing people. But Alexander's book made it easy.
How about you? Obviously, George Washington, he's a pivotal figure in our history. So what did you think about taking on that role?
Well, at the time when I first started out with playing the role, when I first didn't quite hit me until I got the job. After I had auditioned, I was like, oh, it's a role. And then the further I got into the experience of understanding truly who this man was, beyond sort of just the grumpy man who I always imagined on the dollar bill, who always looked like he was a disapproving dad, as opposed to who he really was, which was an amazingly charismatic figure who was by no means perfect, but who really set the tone for this country. And we can look at the choices that were made back then and see how we benefit from them even to today. So it's been a wonderful experience of learning while having the honor of playing the role.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a challenge for you because you also start off playing a little bit on your heels. They're driving you back, and then you start to get your force back coming into this season. What was it like to sort of play that transition of George Washington, where he's, trying to figure out how they're going to survive, and then how are we going to take over?
Well, this season was remarkable in so many ways. We start off exactly where we ended the end of season 3, where Benedict Arnold has made the turn against General Washington and the Continental Army, and the Culper Ring is sort of, I always think of them now as sort of matured and ready to step in to do the most important spy work that ends up helping the Continental Army to win this war. And Craig put it, in an interview I saw recently, where he was like, this season is about the darkness before the dawn. And we all know that the dawn is quite bright, that Yorktown is coming. But the way that we got there is going to be, I think, surprising and incredibly satisfying for the audience over the course of this season.
Yeah. And Heather, playing Anna Strong, maybe it's a bit of a shame we don't know as much as we should know about her. She did so many amazing things for our country. Tell me a little about the research.
Yeah, I didn't have much information about her before we started. There isn't much information about her. There's a lot of speculation. Even Alex speculated she was involved in the spy ring in a big way, but women weren't celebrated in that. I mean, spies weren't celebrated in that way if they were really good at what they were doing. So I looked at some poetry from the time period. I looked at paintings. I was sort of focusing more toward the cultural, domestic side of what life might have been like in that time. Just learning about simple things like how they did laundry and how they did dishes and what they ate and drank, because I just knew that Anna's life was really enmeshed with all of those details that I wanted to really bring out and apply to the more human, universal experience of being alive in that century.
Yeah, can you explain one of those details that you took from that research and you put into the character?
Yeah, I mean, in the very first episode of the entire series, Anna is described as beating a laundry stick against a rock, and I think in the first or second take of the pilot, I got a blood blister, all the way down my hand.
You're doing your work. You're
Yeah,
earning.
yeah. They would just wash these huge felt clothing, and they would lay them on a rock, and they would beat it with a stick to dry it off. And I mean, in a corset, backwards and in heels is really what it is. So, yeah.
It's pretty badass. I like that. Yeah. And for the guys who, for Nick and Heather, who you play spies, I mean, what was it like learning about that spy culture and sort of the break of what we are, spy technology today? It's all phones and Blackberries and that sort of thing. And now, back then, it was actual invisible ink. It was actually like rolled up things you could only see if you scrubbed with a potato or something like that. I mean, what was it like doing that research?
It was exciting. To go off what Heather was just saying, my character, Robert Townsend, no one found out he was even involved with the Culper Ring until the 1930s. So he was a very, very good spy, and no one even knew what he looked like. So other than Alexander's book, it's hard to find a lot of information on him. But it was great. The invisible ink and all the spycraft we had was made by our incredible art department and props department on the show. And you're going to see in the first episode premiering on Saturday, I actually get to play with that stuff a lot. Oh, nice. So it was fun. I actually had to practice a lot of penmanship because they would surprise me with surprise.
We don't realize it, but we don't really write that often these days. Back then, they actually had to do that for the correspondence. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought I was going to get away with it because it was invisible ink. But then when someone walks in the room, you have to switch back to the normal ink, and then the camera's going to catch you writing. So I had to work on that a bit.
How about Heather?
Yeah, just the fact that all the spy work that was happening was interpersonal. It was you weren't sending an anonymous tweet. You were lying to someone's face. You were putting someone at risk just by being near you. And I think as playing a woman from that period, I had a unique perspective on how spying took place in a tavern. It took place walking down the street. Anytime you got information, you became a vessel for the delivery of that information to win the cause. So
there was a lot of spying in plain sight. My character through the entire series is just listening in plain sight, and the less he's noticed, the better. But he ran a very, popular establishment in New York City, and he was a public figure who everyone knew his name and knew what he did. And so that was the riskiest part about it.
And that's one of the great things about the show is that, everyone knows George Washington, everyone knows Benedict Arnold, but these characters of Abraham Woodhull and Robert Townsend and Anna Strong, these are the people who actually, Caleb Brewster, without them, there is no United States of America. Because as, I've often thought, this is like, if this were baseball, we were going to be swept by the British Army. So we needed to use guerrilla warfare. And to have, he was like, what does Robert Townsend look like? That guy right there. That's what he looks like. I mean, because he is Robert Townsend. And this Culper Ring, the exploration, it's Washington's spies. It's about this spy ring sort of and how they helped save this country. And it's one of the most exciting things about our show.
It's amazing. I love this show so much because it's about how normal people, do extraordinary things. Your average bar owner or your average wife or your average servant changed the course of American history forever. And that's why I love that Craig and Barry created it.
Yeah. And Barry and Craig, I mean, we've heard a little bit about this next season. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about how you decided to round out the series? Because you're going into, this is the final season. So everybody should catch up and dial into this season, but tell us a little bit about how you wanted to round it out.
Well, we all know that America won the war, but
Wait,
you don't
what?
necessarily know where all these characters ended up, and where they ended up was surprising, and it's very emotional. It's a very emotional ending. As you guys haven't seen it yet, but I could tell you,
You're getting choked up. I can feel it.
yeah. And I was also saying goodbye to all the characters as well. But leading up to that, we have some of the most exciting spies, some of the biggest battles we've ever, put on screen. And not just Yorktown, there's other big ones. And we've got some really great spy stuff that we weren't able to do in the previous seasons. Robert Townsend was one of the biggest, earliest signal sabotage incidents in espionage history in this season. And so there's that, and then there's some surprising, some faces might be coming back, some surprises in store of characters you might think are gone. So, and all the Darkest Before the Dawn stuff is.
Sorry, yeah, I used that, didn't know.
Yeah, and I think people who haven't seen the series don't realize how taut a thriller it really is, and that plays out a lot in this season because the show really is a thriller, and it's very suspenseful. You don't know which way it's going to go. And Washington put a lot of pressure on Talmadge to increase and dial up the information from the spies. So they were even more put upon, and you really feel that this season. You really do.
How was it like to shoot those bigger scale battle scenes? Can you guys describe that a little bit?
It was great. We go to the real Yorktown to shoot, and we had some, we learned from some of the battles that we've done in the past. Just how to do it better. And our directors who have been with us this time really know, and the crew really knows how to get it done now. And so it's really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, Nick was talking a little bit about history class, but I feel like we don't really remember how much, New York City itself was a stronghold for the British. I mean, I feel like I was watching the series, I was being reminded of that fact. I was like, right, this was a battleground right here. I mean, what was the most insane fact that you saw in the script or through the research you want to share?
I remember reading, it might have been in Alex's book, probably was, but I live in Brooklyn, and I remember reading that there was one night where they were waiting to fight. I can't remember which battle it was, but it was early on in the war, and the English were posted in York City, and the Americans were in Jersey, I think, and they were just looking at each other basically across the East River. Is that right? Yeah, or one of the rivers, I can't remember. But anyway, they could see each other and they could see the bombs going off, and they weren't fighting, they were waiting for something. And I like to think about that whenever I take the F train or the Q. And I'm like,
it's so surreal. How about you
God.
guys? Anything that you were blown away by?
I think I was most surprised by, growing up, reading history, going to history class. I always liked history, but the Revolutionary War era was always confusing to me because it was like, who are all these guys? They all wearing weird clothes and their hair's all, I don't get it. Whatever, let's get to the Civil War. But what I didn't realize was how lucky we are to have a country. How completely we shouldn't even have this place. We were going to lose this war, and all of these people that we now celebrate would have been hung for it. We would have been treasonous. We would have been, what I call Owen Yeoman, who I was on the phone with last night, and I just call him a treasonous you-know-what, because he, is as Benedict Arnold. But
Thank God he's not here, right?
Well, no, I wish we were here. But that's what we would have been had, the victor writes the history. Right. And I just didn't realize how close we were to not having a country at all. And then in today's world, in America, where we're battling each other all the time, that we should be a little bit more grateful about the world that we have and take better care of it. And that's new information, at least for me.
Yeah. I think the Benedict Arnold stuff really surprised me. His defection, how suspenseful it was when we got to the point to write it last season, was like, wow, really? It was that down to the wire, and a lot of things that I think some people could assume that we made up for TV, we didn't. And then this season, the idea that Simcoe, who is the scariest guy on our show, and Benedict Arnold team up is a thing that you would expect a TV show to do, but they really did. Right. They teamed up. They became part of the same unit, and so that kind of
superhero movie.
It was. It was like the gift that keeps on giving. Where you're like, oh, they did this. Okay, we'll do it.
One of the most surprising things to me, I researched, my character is a Quaker, and so I researched a lot about Quakerism and the influence that the book Common Sense and that Quaker thinkers and writers at the time had in the war starting, in shaping thought around America towards the revolution. And they were really serious about it because they were a persecuted religious minority. And just thinking about today and today's culture and all the conversation we have around that this group of people was a persecuted religious minority who put and who were pacifists, who put everything on the line in support of this, revolution. It's incredible to me. It's so modern and so relevant.
And you mentioned a little bit about the wigs and the wardrobe. I mean, what was it like to don on the George Washington garb?
It did a lot of the work for me a lot of the time. At the beginning of every season, I guess it was probably like a month before we
Yourself like doing this every once in a while?
in life. No, but about a month before we would go back, I would turn to my wife and I go, I don't know how the hell I'm gonna pull this off. Like, how am I gonna do George? Like, this is not gonna work. Like, they're not gonna buy this. And then I would get into the makeup trailer, and artists would put on my wig, and Ashley would do the the little pock marks on my face, and then I would put on the costume. I was like, all right, well, there it is. Like, that's all I got to do. Now
stand in a room.
You got to stand in the room and just listen. So it was actually true. I will miss it. I'm very grateful to the producers for letting us keep certain pieces that I can.
What'd you take? Come on.
I got the. I think you know.
Barry, look that way.
Well, no. I got the cape, which makes me very happy because I have this great picture when I came home with the cape and the hat and the wig. So I've got the wig like in a corner of the room, and my two sons, when I first got home, they put on the cape and the hat, and I got great pictures of them pretending. So it's really quite.
Let's face it, Mount Vernon wants Ian to come there very often, okay? He is the president right now.
I like it. Halloween's going to be really fun this year. Yeah. And Nick, how about you? How was the wardrobe
I'm not gonna miss the wig at all. No, it's like the only show on TV where the guys have to spend more time in the hair trailer than the women.
You're right.
No, I'm not gonna miss the wig. No, but
What'd you take? Did you take stuff?
I have the chair from Townsend's bedroom. I have the rug from Townsend's bedroom. I have some. I just took loads of stuff, Craig.
Interior decorating is done.
Get
You
anyone
don't
in
have to
trouble.
worry about it.
Yeah, it's like a museum in my
There's
office
an
right
online
now.
auction right now to buy every asset from the show. I'm not kidding. You can look it up. The
that's
Turn
pretty
Washington
amazing.
Spies online assets.
Okay, awesome. Heather, how about you? How
I
was
got the
wardrobe?
corset. I got the corset. It's in my house. I'll probably never wear it again, but I have it to burn in case. No, the wardrobe for me was fantastic. But yeah, it's true. I would sit in the makeup chair and watch them go through hours of glue and alcohol, and I just had it, my hair brushed out and put in a bun. But I suffered. I suffered plenty. They know that. Yeah.
Was it surreal to be hanging out in the wardrobe, like going to craft services and be wearing,
The best is when you'd see a lot of the background actors in the period costumes waiting, because they'd sit in kind of a circle of metal chairs, and it kind of looked like a colonial AA meeting. That was my favorite thing.
Yeah, lots of people wearing red coats and texting, very incongruent images.
I mean, the locations look so fantastic. Can you guys speak a little bit about finding those locations? You shot a lot in Virginia, right?
We shot all in Virginia. Yeah, Richmond and around there. Petersburg was New York City for us. Williamsburg was Philadelphia. And then some other places around for London we go back to this year. And like I said, we go to Yorktown this year. So Virginia really had, in about an hour outside of Petersburg, Richmond and everywhere around there, all the stuff that we needed. It's a very good colonial place.
We had a great production designer, Carolyn Henania, who just put together exactly what the period looked like, and we would be able to, do certain things in Petersburg and some of these towns that still had the cobblestone streets and so on. Then we just made this decision which town would be which city we were trying for. So Petersburg, for example, was York City, early New York, lots of assets there. And, the actors made great sacrifices. We would work, October, November, December, February, and it was freezing cold. And sometimes they're standing there in period wardrobe with 21 degrees doing scenes, a lot of exposure for everybody, so it was a great challenge.
I never had to do any of that because
You were just in
I
a
played
bar.
a pacifist. So everyone on the cast hated me because they would all be cold and muddy, and I would be completely warm and fine.
Okay, well, there's a couple of great cast members that aren't here. Any grievances you want to air with them? Anything you want to say out of the camera?
Bring the
Let's get
list.
it out.
I should have brought the list. Yeah.
I mean, what was
Amy
like
Bell would
Jamie?
not be wearing a suit right now.
No, we love and miss them all. It's nice because especially when you're doing something out of town and where none of us are from, Richmond, so you get a kind of family feel because we're the ones that we hang out with and go to the movies with and watch the Super Bowl with. It's nice, and it's been a fun family to be a part of for the last few years.
You guys stayed in touch at all with the rest of the cast now that the show's coming out and talking about it?
Yeah, spoke to. Yeah, I mean, we
Dan Henschel sends his love to everyone from Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, Skype them in, you know.
We should. One thing I want to say is how grateful we are to finish this, to have an experience. You know, television is different these days than it was when, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, where it was going to be on television at 9 p.m. and if you didn't see it at 9 p.m., you're never going to see it, or maybe you're going to VCR it. But with what we've just done, we've just put 40 episodes of television that eventually, the first 3 seasons are already on Netflix, and it's going to live forever. So every day, someone's going to press play on the first episode and start the journey of this experience. And we've all given so much of our heart, our and every bit of our spirit to this, and to know that it's going to live forever, it's something that, speaking personally, I think for all of us too, that how grateful we are to AMC for letting us get to the end of this experience. It's a success. We have finished this war, and we have told a story. And for all audience members who have not yet climbed aboard, you will have that chance and have this long ride, and it's something that you will absolutely enjoy. Yeah.
There's nothing better than binge watching a show and then getting to be a part of the actual finale. That's highly recommended to everybody. So we have some questions out in the audience that we're going to get to.
Hello. So I'm a really big fan of the show. I'm really excited for the final season. As a cast or individually, was there like a most challenging scene or episode for you guys to film, and why was that?
I think the turtle was really challenging to shoot. On stage, in the water, we found somebody who had a practical one. I don't know if do you remember that episode where Caleb Brewster, is traveling? That was a real major challenge. The battle scenes that Craig sort of created for the show and supervised how they would be orchestrated, those were, a great challenge. And I think actually there were so many things even just in Setauket Village where, like I said about, I always remember that scene with you and Heather, you and Megan in the first season, like 22 degrees it was, and felt much colder, and they're having to do a very dramatic scene amongst each other. I think the challenge of just, cold weather and dealing with that. And it sort of was reminiscent, I think, it made us all think about Valley Forge and what the sacrifices were for Washington and the troops and just how hard it was. You got to sort of experience that a little bit in shooting the show. What were the challenges, especially back in the period, living in tents and being so exposed?
On a much lighter note of something that was challenging, one of my first episodes on the show, Jamie Bell and I had to play a very long game of checkers while talking to each other, these really long speeches. And this scene is very complicated between the two of us, but also requires us to make certain checkers moves at certain times, which was took a lot. It was Kate Dennis who choreographed it. So it was a kind of a dual concentration that was I found very challenging. It's like 22-degree weather, right?
Yeah, 22-degree weather.
I had a very challenging episode, which was the Valley Forge episode, where General Washington goes. It's so interesting. They chose, instead of doing the whole Valley Forge, was the hardest, one of the many hard parts of the war. And one of the things the writers that Craig and the writers decided to do was sort of sum up the experience of that through the mind of George Washington. So we actually see George Washington have a nervous breakdown on screen. And that was challenging, not just in the doing of it, but also in getting to a vulnerable place and showing this other side of this man that we all think we know so well. That was definitely the most challenging one, even to this day.
How about creating a season? Is that the most challenging?
I think, the first season was. That once we I felt we cracked the code in the second season. When there's just so many different ways to go with the show in this time period, because we just don't put this period on TV that often. And the second season, when we really buckled down and said, this is a spy show first and foremost, and we let the period come into the prism of that, to me, then it was not easy. It became easy to crack it. Production-wise, it was anything to do with the water. Anything on water was hell.
Yeah, water was hard. Yeah. Water was hard. I didn't have to do a lot of that. I think I had an amazing stunt woman who did most of it for me.
You jumped in. Did you jump in there with her?
Well, I swam.
We CG'd your face onto her.
That's
okay,
right.
Yeah, she was there. Okay.
I was willing.
Cheating
I think it was
television.
an insurance issue.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Hi guys, how are you? I was wondering if you could meet any historical figure in this show, who would it be and why?
I would meet George Washington.
They take your
why?
wig away.
Why? I feel like I've been living with the man for 4 years. Meryl Streep said when she was playing Margaret Thatcher, she said that when you play a real person, what you should do is sort of ask that person to come halfway down to you and then spend your time going halfway up to that person. And so that's what I tried to do every day. And I'd like to just sit with him and say, you good with what I did? You know, you good with it? And also say, good job overall. Not a perfect person by any means, made choices that even to today we can look at and judge, rightfully judge, in regards to slavery, though there was growth in that through the later part of his life. So I mean, he was a very complex and interesting and imperfect man, but also a great human being. And without him, we're not here.
For me, it used to be reading. I read so much about Talmadge before this and during it, and I'd always thought, God, if I could meet him and understand, you know, sort of who he was and how close to Washington, or, you know, just the conduit of all this. But as, you know, we sort of progressed, there was like, I had a fascination for, you know, the ring and you know, wanting to meet any one of them and understand how they kept the secrets with their families and, you know, kids after that, and talk about things outside of the show would have been a fascinating thing. And I remember in Alex's book reading, Craig and I talked about this a lot, reading Abe Woodhull's letter to Washington about wanting to be paid back for the sacrifice of the spying, you know, not being able to pull in crops and so on. I thought, like, my God, it takes balls to be able to write a letter to General Washington wanting to get recompense, you know, to be paid back for that. I just thought, God, I'd really like to have met him, all of them, you know, and understand what that friendship meant, you know, to them, how they kept that bond for so long.
It's a really interesting thing that we explore this season, too, is recompense and what that means to each of them in closing out this story, how it gets, you know, we've already seen a bit of how it's gotten Benedict Arnold into trouble, but we see how each of them deal with what have I sacrificed and what should I get back for it. So, yeah, that's really interesting, Barry.
For me, it would be Benedict Arnold. I was really fascinated by, you know, this guy who was so respected and admired and yet reviled at the same time. And as much as he was respected, he just didn't see it. And he became, from somebody I really didn't know anything about, honestly, beforehand, except for, you know, he was a huge trader. He was so, getting into him and getting into the research, he was so complex and so human. And I kept wondering, the same way that, you know, Ian said, like, you know, did I get it right? We're like, you know, are we getting this right? Was he, you know, is he obnoxious enough? Is he hurt enough? Are we showing all the right things? And I just kept wondering what it would be like to meet him and look at his face.
Owen was brilliant. Yeah. Owen, I just want to say, I mean, the work he did this season, you know, traitorous pig, but he really was so much leaned on him this season, and you know, he, with the world the way it is, he's a very good indication of power and what power can do to somebody and how it can destroy them. And he just did amazing work. He's a wonderful actor and a great man, and I want to tip my hat to him.
Absolutely. Okay, we have time for one more question right there.
Hi. So I was just wondering what each of your what you'll each miss most about the series now that it's come to a conclusion.
The cast.
Me too. Same cast.
It's the best cast
Well played.
I've worked with. I've said that before. It's not like, what, we were, you know, they know I've said that, you know, and it's not just the talent and that the way that everybody, you know, was distinct from one another, but it was, you know, you're asking about like the grievances, like it's crazy. Everybody got along, and that's rare. It just is, and that was also a great gift.
Yeah, they had meals together, they were friends, they lived in Richmond together, they rehearsed together, and I really sensed this great bond between the whole cast. And for Craig and I, it was great pleasure, you know, just being social and, you know, looking at, you know, Heather often would start a text string and we'd all respond, and it was great. I mean, I'm going to miss that a lot. I had this really great family there for 4 years.
Yeah, the same, yeah.
Yeah, the people really were incredible. I mean, I think I also will miss the it's really unusual to get to work with such a deep, rich context underneath you. I mean, I think maybe actors get to do that in theater slightly more often than
You guys all
on
have
film.
backgrounds in theater, so that's something really too, right? Yeah.
So I think I'll miss. I mean, I think I'll speak for myself, but I think of acting sometimes as like a service profession. If you think about it, if you try to give homage to the people you're playing or the imaginary people you're playing, but to get to play a real person who didn't ever get celebrated is just very moving to me and feels like it links me to a history of people that I'm proud to be a product of.
Yeah, and it was really reciprocal. I mean, I'd never worked on a show like this. Craig put together a brilliant writing staff, and each member of the staff was so committed to something historical, that a story they wanted to tell, something they wanted to do with each character. And as seasons went by, you know, they'd be excited about the history, be excited about the portrayals of everybody. Everybody was so passionate about coming to the show. It was great. It was just a great experience that way.
It's also not just the regular cast, but we have an incredible guest cast on this show. And because my character runs this bar, I get all these guest actors coming through. I get to work with John Billingsley and John Carroll Lynch and Johnny Coyne, lots of people named John. And we have other great people like Aldous Hodge, who comes onto the show, and Stephen Root, these incredible actors that get to come through, and we just get to visit. Maybe Tina Benko this season that we get to take out to dinner for maybe one night after work. But it's this incredible ensemble from New York and Los Angeles and London and Canada. It's this real, in Australia, this real international group of people working together to tell this story. It's really incredible.
Well, I can't wait for everybody to see how this all plays out on Turn, AMC on Saturdays, right? Tune in, guys. Yeah, check it out. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.